At 20, I learned exactly what my place in the Bellamy household was worth. 4 sacks of winter barley, 1 gray mule with a clouded eye, and 90 days before Vernon Quill's men came back for the farm. The bargain was waiting in the yard when I stepped out of the smokehouse with salt on my sleeves. A mountain wagon stood beside the fence, its 2 dark horses steaming in the cold. Beside them waited a man I had seen once at the feed store. Rowan Kincaid looked as if the ridge had sent him down unfinished. He was tall, broad, and weathered, with a pale scar across his jaw. His left boot was braced in iron and leather. He planted that foot carefully before giving it weight. My stepmother, Beatrice, stood between him and the wagon with a folded paper in her hand. Celeste stood behind her. That was the first thing I understood. The second was the way Celeste would not meet my eyes. "You took your time," Beatrice said. "I was packing pork. You won't need to finish." I looked from Beatrice to the fresh grain already stacked in our shed, then noticed the mule tied behind Rowan's wagon. My stomach tightened. Rowan followed my gaze. Something changed in his face. Not surprise exactly, but attention sharpened into suspicion. Beatrice opened the folded paper. "Mr. Kincaid has come for the arrangement." What arrangement? The winter contract. Beatrice reached back and caught Celeste's hand. Rowan looked at their joined grip, then at me. "The contract name's Celeste Bellamy," he said. His voice was low and even. It carried no valley politeness. Beatrice answered too quickly. "Celeste's health has worsened." Celeste was pink-cheeked beneath her blue bonnet. No cough shook her shoulders. I looked at the paper again. "What work?" I asked. Rowan did not answer at once. He was still studying Beatrice. 6 months on Blackpine Ridge," he said finally. "Keeping stores, tending stock, mending harness, accounts, if she can do them." "She can," Beatrice said. I almost laughed. For 3 weeks, Beatrice had made Celeste copy columns from my father's ledger. Whenever a sum came wrong, I had been called in to fix it. She had recited my skills and given them her daughter's name. "You told him about me," I said. Beatrice's eyes hardened. "I told him what this family could provide." Rowan took the paper from her. "How long have you known?" he asked me. "About 10 breaths." His gray-green gaze held mine with uncomfortable steadiness. Beatrice stepped closer to him. "The terms remain the same. Nora is older, stronger, better suited to the altitude, and willing." No one answered. Beatrice lowered her voice. "Quill will take this place before Christmas unless I pay him. The barley carries us to spring. The mule lets me plow. You said you needed a capable young woman. I said worker. You said unmarried." His jaw tightened. Celeste finally looked at me. There were tears in her eyes. Mine had learned to stay where no one could use them against me. "Nora," she whispered. I waited. She said nothing else. Beatrice turned on me. "Go pack. I have no wages here to pack. You have clothes. 2 dresses belong to me. The rest were yours before they were mine." Color rose in her face. "Do not make this uglier than it is." That nearly broke something loose in me. I looked at the grain, at the mule, at Celeste's gloved hand protected inside Beatrice's bare one. Then I looked at Rowan Kincaid. "Did you buy a wife?" I asked. His expression did not move, but Beatrice inhaled sharply. "No." "Did she tell you that?" "She told me her daughter understood the arrangement." Which daughter? Silence answered. Rowan folded the contract once, very precisely, and slid it inside his coat. Beatrice stepped toward him. You cannot simply withdraw. The grain is delivered. It can be loaded again. And the mule? Can walk. Panic flashed across her face. It was the first honest thing I had seen there all morning. You do that, she said, and Quill owns this farm by the end of the month. Rowan's eyes stayed on her. That debt isn't the girl's doing. No, Beatrice said, but it will be her ruin too. She faced me then, and for one moment the anger fell away. I saw the truth beneath it. Not cruelty alone, but fear narrowed until it had room for only one daughter. Celeste won't last up there, she said. You will. I looked past her at the house where my father's chair had vanished, 2 days after his burial, and at the barn roof I had patched alone. Either way, the house had already closed its door. What happens when the 6 months end? I asked. Rowan turned to me fully. The pass opens. You take your pay and go where you choose. What pay? His gaze shifted to Beatrice. She looked away. That answered him. Get what belongs to you, he said, nothing more. Beatrice's shoulders loosened with relief. Mine did not. I went inside. Celeste followed me as far as the bedroom door. I packed 2 dresses, wool stockings, my father's brass awl, 3 harness needles, and the ledger I had hidden behind a loose baseboard. Celeste stood in the doorway twisting her gloves. I thought Mama would tell him, before or after he reached the mountain. I was afraid. So was I. I closed the satchel and walked past her. Beatrice offered me a wrapped loaf. Rowan took it. She'll eat from my stores. Her hand remained in the air, empty. I climbed onto the wagon. Rowan moved around the team with practiced care, checking traces and buckles. When he stepped up, the iron at his ankle clicked against the wheel hub. He caught the side rail, hauled himself onto the bench, and settled without asking for help. He gathered the reins. Beatrice stood with Celeste near the porch. The wagon rolled north. I did not turn around. For the first 2 hours, Rowan said nothing. The road narrowed beside a river, rimmed with ice. We climbed past abandoned charcoal pits and dense fir. The wagon jolted over stone, and Rowan took each impact through his right side without complaint. I kept both hands around my satchel. By noon, Rowan stopped beneath an overhang. He climbed down stiffly and poured water into 2 tin cups. I took mine. Were you told anything about me? He asked. That you lived alone, that your leg was ruined, that you wanted a young woman before the snow. His mouth flattened. Anything else? That I should be useful and not complain. That sounds like Beatrice. You know her well? I bought oats from her twice. I stared into the water. He said, I asked Quill's agent if anyone in the hollow wanted paid winter work. Your stepmother wrote that Celeste could keep accounts, cure meat, repair tack, and manage animals. She can embroider violets. I gathered that. Despite myself, I looked at him. What did you promise her? I asked. 4 sacks of barley, the mule, and a share of my spring fur payment. She didn't mention the last part. I'm no longer surprised. Am I? His brow drew together. Your spring fur payment. Am I part of it? No, but the grain and mule were exchanged for me. They were advanced against labor. Whose labor? He looked toward the climbing road. Yours, apparently. That sounds like an exchange. It does. The plainness of his answer unsettled me more than a denial would have. He put the cup away. "Why unmarried?" I asked. His hand paused on the kettle hook. "Quill's agent said a husband might come looking for his wife's wages. That was all I meant." We both knew what Beatrice had meant. We climbed until the world became rock, fur, and early snow. When my hands began shaking, Rowan set a buffalo robe between us without touching me. I pulled it across my lap. Near dusk, the wagon left the main trail. Blackpine Ridge rose ahead, its upper slopes already white. The final road was little more than 2 ruts through timber. The cabin appeared only when we were nearly upon it. It sat beneath the ridge, built from squared logs darkened by weather. A stone chimney smoked above it. A low barn and a roof-weighted shed stood nearby. No neighboring lamp showed through the trees. Rowan brought the wagon beside the porch. "Stay seated," he said. I stiffened. "The ground drops on your side." He climbed down, came around the team, and showed me where the packed earth ended beneath a crust of snow. Then he stepped back. He did not offer his hands. I climbed down on my own. Inside, the cabin smelled of pine smoke, leather, and dried apples. The main room held a stove, a work table, shelves, and a narrow bed. Papers lay in untidy stacks near an ink bottle. A closed wooden door stood beside the pantry. Rowan lit a lamp. "That room is yours." I did not move. He unlocked the door. The small room beyond held a cot, a washstand, and a window shuttered from within. Rowan removed the key from the lock and placed it in my palm. "That locks from the inside," he said. "I don't have another key." I closed my fingers around it. He went back to the work table and took the folded contract from his coat. "What are you doing?" "Correcting a lie." He sat, set his braced foot forward, and drew the ink closer. With one firm line, he crossed out Celeste Bellamy. Then he looked up at me. "You read?" "Yes." "You write?" "Yes." "Then come make certain I don't cheat you." I approached slowly. He wrote Nora Bellamy beneath the crossed-out name, then added terms in a compact hand. $10 a month, 1/10 of the net spring fur proceeds, food and shelter without charge, a private room, no claim upon my person, passage down the ridge when weather allowed, and the right for either of us to end the contract. He pushed the pen toward me. I read every line twice. "There's no witness," I said. "I'll sign first." He did. I picked up the pen. "If I leave tomorrow?" "I take you as far as the lower road. And if the snow closes it, you stay until travel is safe. You still earn wages. If I cannot do all the work, then we decide what you can do. Not Beatrice?" "No." The answer came without hesitation. Wind pressed at the cabin walls, carrying a storm. Rowan nodded toward the western window. Cloud bank crossed the divide while we climbed. First heavy snow may reach us tonight. If you want the valley, we leave before dawn. After that, the road may close for weeks. He rose and moved toward the door. "Where are you going?" "To stable the team. You need time to decide without me standing over you." The door shut behind him. I remained at the table with the contract, the pen, and the key. For years, every choice in the Bellamy house had been made before anyone asked me. Celeste first, Nora afterward. The man outside had taken me from the farm, but he had also written a door back into the bargain. I went to the window. Rowan was unhitching the horses. He stopped once with both hands against the mare's flank until the pain in his ankle released, then straightened and continued. The mountain frightened me. So did the valley. Fear was not the same as refusal. I returned to the table, added one sentence beneath the terms, and turned the page so there could be no mistake. My wages are mine alone. Then I signed. When Rowan came back carrying an armful of split wood, snow had begun collecting in his hair. I held out the contract. "I'll stay through the winter," I said, "under my name." His eyes went to the sentence I had added, then to the key still clenched in my other hand. He set the wood beside the stove. "Under your name," he agreed. By morning, snow had erased the wagon tracks that might have carried me back to Larkspur Hollow. It filled the ruts, buried the lower trail, and climbed halfway up the porch steps. I stood at the window with the cabin key warm in my fist while Rowan tested the drifts with a shovel handle. He had been awake before me. Coffee steamed on the stove. Cornmeal waited beneath a clean cloth. My door had remained shut all night. No hand had tried the latch. When I entered, Rowan was tightening the leather straps around the iron brace on his left boot. The lowest buckle required both hands and a silence that lasted too long. "The road's gone," he said. "For how long?" "3 days if the wind turns. 3 weeks if it doesn't." He nodded toward the stove. "Eat. Then I'll show you what keeps us alive." We began with the barn. 2 horses occupied the larger stalls. The gray mule Beatrice had accepted in the bargain stood in the third. Rowan called her Junebug. She pinned her ears at him and relaxed when I rubbed the hollow above her clouded eye. "You know mules?" he said. "I know when one has been handled badly." Her halter had cracked near the cheek ring. Someone had wrapped wire around the split, and the wire had begun cutting the leather. That won't last a week. It lasted the climb. That wasn't my question. I expected the sort of correction Beatrice used whenever I sounded too certain. Rowan only said, "Scrap leather is in the tack chest." The work looked simple while he named it. Hay twice a day, grain measured by the tin, ice broken from the trough before sunrise, hooves checked after every climb, manure carried beyond the spring runoff. Doing it was different. The shovel handle was too thick for my grip. My first loaded barrow struck a frozen rut and tipped, spilling half its contents across my skirt. I caught the handle, slipped, and landed on one knee. Rowan did not laugh. He did not rush to lift me either. "Move your hands farther apart," he said. "You're steering it like a sewing basket." I've never steered a sewing basket. That explains the landing. One corner of his mouth moved. I stood, loaded the barrow again, and changed my grip. The second trip reached the slope. By noon, my shoulders burned. Rowan had shown me the spring box, smokehouse, meat shed, trap rack, and the covered wood passage along the north wall. He moved slowly but wasted nothing. Every trip carried something. Every tool returned to its peg. He leaned on his axe only when he believed my back was turned. The cabin stores were less disciplined. Beans and flour had been shoved beneath shelves of dried fruit. Salt sat in 3 separate crocks. Cured meat hung near a damp patch in the wall. 2 jars of rendered fat had cracked around their rims. A mouse had chewed through a corn sack and been rewarded for its ambition. "You arranged this?" I asked. "I put food where it fit." "That is not the same thing." He studied the shelves. "What do you need?" "Paper, charcoal, empty crates, and permission to move everything." "You have it. All of it? If you find a better place." At Bellamy Farm, I had learned to hide competence until Beatrice needed it, then use it without making her feel challenged. Rowan simply handed me the problem. I counted 31 pounds of beans, 17 of flour before Beatrice's barley, 9 jars of apples, 6 of peaches, venison enough for 7 careful weeks, and salt pork for 3. The salt troubled me. How much meat do you expect to cure? I asked. 6 deer if the weather holds, smaller game besides. You don't have enough salt. His hands stopped over the trap chain he was repairing. I bought 50 pounds in August. You have 14. I haven't used 36. Then someone else has. He looked toward the papers beside the ink bottle. The stacks were worse than the pantry. Invoices lay beneath hunting permits. A bridge company letter had been folded around 2 nails. 3 receipts were stuck together with grease. I found a fur account from Vernon Quill's firm beneath a pulley sketch. You keep records like a man expecting the cabin to burn. I know what I sold. Do you know what you were paid? His silence answered. The fur statement listed transport, storage, grading, and a ridge access fee. What is a ridge access fee? Rowan's chair scraped the floor. There isn't one. There is on this paper. $8.40. He stood beside me, close enough that I smelled snow and horse on his shirt. He did not take the page from my hand. That was last spring. There may be others. Later. The word came hard. I placed the statement on the table and squared its edge with the pile. Then tell me what work belongs to me. His brow lowered. That's not what I meant. It is what you said. He rubbed his beard. Quill has men in every warehouse between the hollow and the rail camp. If he has been shaving payments, I need proof before I accuse him. I was going to sort the receipts, not ride down with a pistol. You looked ready to do both. I do not own a pistol. The quiet held for a moment. Then he pulled out the second chair. Sort them. So I did. Night came while the storm thickened. Snow hissed against the shutters. Rowan cleaned traps at one end of the table, while I built columns at the other. Later, he knocked on my door. The sound was so unfamiliar that I did not answer at first. Nora? Yes. The temperature's dropping. You can come in. He opened the door only far enough to place another blanket on the washstand. You don't need permission to bring a blanket. I do if the room is yours. He closed the door again. I stood looking at the keyhole after his footsteps moved away. The next morning, I failed at splitting wood. The maul had been made for Rowan's hands. Its handle was long enough to catch my skirt and too thick for my fingers to close around. I struck one round 4 times and produced nothing but pale scars in the bark. On the 5th swing, the head glanced sideways. Rowan caught the handle before it hit my shin. Enough. I can do it. With that maul, you can injure the only other worker here. Heat climbed my neck. He carried the tool to the shed. I thought he had ended the lesson. Instead, he returned with a shorter axe, a draw knife, and a rasp. Sitting on the chopping block, he shaved down the spare handle until it fit my grip, then shortened it by 3 inches. You don't have to remake your tools for me. It's a spare. You said every tool had a place. It still will. He tested the grip against my palm without closing his fingers around mine. Your strength isn't the problem, he said. The leverage is wrong. My first strike lodged halfway into the round. The second split it with a dry crack. Rowan set another piece on the block. He did not praise me. He did not need to. By the end of the week, my palms had blistered anyway. I hid them beneath gloves and rose before Rowan, so he would not see how slowly I buttoned my dress. Our days took shape. Before light, fire, coffee, trough ice. Morning, barn, wood, stores. Afternoon, whatever the weather permitted. Evening, mending, accounts, and the silence of two people still deciding what could safely be said. Rowan never entered my room without knocking. After noticing that I waited for him to light the lamp before I closed my door, he began leaving it burning low on the table. I never mentioned the flat stones I heated near the stove and left beside his chair after long days outside. He rested his braced foot on them without comment. That was our first kind of courtesy. Junebug's halter broke on the 6th morning. A sheet of snow slid from the barn roof. She jerked from the rail, the cracked strap snapped, and she bolted toward the lower slope with leather whipping beside her eye. Rowan moved after her. His braced boot struck hidden ice. He caught the rail, but pain folded him over it. "I'll get her. Don't chase. She'll run farther." I carried out a scoop of oats and walked without looking directly at the mule. Junebug circled once, breath smoking, then slowed at the rattle of grain. I crouched beside a stump and spoke as if I had no interest in her. She came close enough to smell my sleeve. I caught the trailing strap and led her back. Rowan had straightened by then. His face was colorless beneath his beard. Inside the barn, I removed the wire and damaged leather. A patch would have failed where the old strap had dried around the buckle, so I replaced the whole cheek piece, punched new holes with my father's awl, and stitched the fold around the ring. Rowan watched from an overturned bucket, his injured leg extended. Beatrice said Celeste made harness. Celeste once stitched a blue ribbon onto a pony bridle. Did it hold? The ribbon did. A brief smile reached his eyes. I fitted the repaired halter to Junebug and pulled twice on the strap. It will hold. Rowan inspected the stitching. You doubled the stress point. The old one tore because it had one line. He nodded toward the workbench. Can you do the same with a load harness? He brought out a set of hauling straps. One trace was split nearly halfway across. The timber sled needs those, he said. I meant to replace them in spring. They would not survive one loaded descent. No. Then why were they hanging ready? His gaze dropped to his brace. Because he had intended to use them anyway. Bring me the best hide scraps you have, I said. Not the easiest ones to reach. We worked beside each other through the afternoon. I cut and beveled a reinforcement strip. Rowan warmed pitch and steadied the leather while I drove holes through both layers. When my blistered hand slipped, he moved the awl away and placed a clean strip of cloth beside my elbow. By dusk, the trace had 2 staggered rows of stitching and a riveted plate around its weakest section. Rowan tested it outside with Junebug and the timber sled, empty first, then with 2 logs, then 4. The leather tightened without creeping. When he came back, snow had collected on his shoulders. How much wood does that let us move? I asked. Twice what we could drag by hand. How much did you expect before the old trace failed? He looked toward the dark timber. Not enough. There it was. Not gratitude exactly. Something harder for Rowan to admit. Need. That evening, he cleared a shelf beside the account papers and placed my father's ledger on it. For your records. It was a narrow, ordinary shelf, but it was space made for work he now believed mattered. I arranged the quill invoices by date. Rowan watched, then brought me the receipt for the missing salt without being asked. The warehouse had charged him for £50. A notation in different ink claimed £36 had been withheld as a winter reserve levy. Rowan read it twice. Quill owns no winter reserve. No, I said. But he may be counting on you never counting at all. Outside, Blackpine Ridge disappeared beneath new snow. Inside, we began a second ledger. The first column in the new ledger showed what Quill had taken. The next showed how long he had been taking it. 3 seasons of statements lay across the table by the time I finished sorting them. The names of the charges changed. Grading loss, upland handling, emergency storage, but the hand behind them did not. Quill's company had removed nearly a fifth of Rowan's earnings before paying him. Rowan stood at the stove with one hand braced against the mantel. "How much?" he asked. $47.12. His shoulders went still. "That is more than I paid for Junebug, and it does not include the salt." He crossed the room, took the latest statement, and read it as though the numbers might rearrange themselves out of shame. "At the bridge camps," he said, "a man who stole $47 lost his teeth. Quill has other men to lose theirs for him." Rowan looked toward the shuttered window. "When the pass opens, I'll settle it." "With what proof?" He tapped the paper. "With copies he can claim are clerical mistakes." His eyes came back to mine. I turned the ledger around. Each deduction was listed by date, amount, and the name Quill had given it. Beside those entries, I had begun a second column for the lawful transport and storage rates printed on older receipts from before Quill bought the warehouse. "You need every statement you can find," I said, "and someone besides us who can say these charges do not exist. I know trappers west of the Divide. Then write their names before you forget where you put them." He pulled out the chair. That was the first night Rowan worked in my ledger instead of watching me do it. The days shortened until afternoon seemed to arrive directly after breakfast. Snow packed the world into fewer paths. Cabin to barn, barn to woodpile, woodpile to spring box. Beyond those, the ridge kept its own account in tracks. Rowan taught me to read them. Rabbit print sat lightly on the crust, paired and delicate. Fox traveled in a narrow, confident line. Deer broke through the surface with pointed hooves and left the snow churned behind them. "Wolf?" I asked one morning. He crouched beside a print wider than my palm. "Dog. There is no dog up here." "Then it is a wolf that wants us to call it a dog." He showed me the deeper pad, the spread of the toes, and the straight purpose of the trail. It followed the tree line above the barn. "Will it come close?" "Not while it can find easier meat." "And when it cannot?" Rowan rose carefully, favoring his right side. "Then you learn the rifle." The rifle was heavier than it looked above the cabin door. Rowan unloaded it before handing it to me, then checked the chamber again. Never trust a gun because someone tells you it's empty. "You just told me." "Exactly." Outside, he set a split piece of firewood against a snowbank. My first attempt to shoulder the rifle caught my coat collar beneath the stock. "Lower your elbow." I did. The barrel wandered. "Stop fighting its weight. Hold it close." "I am. You're holding it like it insulted you." "It may." He moved behind my right shoulder, near enough to guide without touching. "May I?" I nodded. 2 fingers adjusted my elbow. His other hand shifted the stock inward, then withdrew. "Now breathe out. Don't snatch the trigger." The first shot struck the bank a foot left of the wood. The recoil bruised my shoulder and sent heat through my face. Rowan said nothing. I loaded the next cartridge myself. The second shot clipped bark. The third split the wood from its base. "Again," he said. By the end of the lesson, My shoulder ached and my ears rang. Rowan collected the brass while I checked the rifle twice before carrying it inside. The wolf did not return. Other signs did. A strip of red cloth appeared on a fur below the western trap line. Rowan cut it down and held it between two fingers. "Survey mark?" I asked. "Quill's crews use red. What would they survey here? Timber. On your land? Near it if they want to claim a mistake." We found 2 more strips the following week and a sharpened stake driven beside the creek. Rowan pulled it free and carried it home. At the table, he laid it across Quill's statements. The stolen money no longer looked like carelessness. It looked like a hand testing a door. We wrote letters to 3 trappers and a former warehouse clerk Rowan knew in Cedar Wash. The pass was closed, but a freight runner sometimes crossed the lower route between storms. Rowan wrapped the letters in oilcloth and kept them ready. I began rising earlier. There was always one more task that could be done before he noticed. Beans set to soak, ash carried out, straps oiled, numbers copied. If I finished enough, there would be no reason to regret the woman Beatrice had sent. The blisters on my hands split again. I bound them tightly and kept my gloves on at meals. Rowan noticed anyway. He noticed when I used both hands to lift the coffee pot. He noticed when I left half my supper untouched because fatigue had closed my stomach. He noticed the morning I dropped a bucket at the spring box because my fingers would not close. "Back to the cabin," he said. "The trough still needs filling. I'll do it. You should not carry water over ice. And you should not carry anything until you can hold a bucket." I reached for it. He set his boot on the handle. "Move." "No." The word landed between us harder than shouting. I straightened. "The contract says I tend the stock. The contract does not say you work until your hands fail. If I stop every time something hurts, nothing gets done. If you hide every injury, I cannot plan around it. I am not asking you to plan around me." His expression closed. "That is the problem." He lifted the bucket and walked toward the barn, the iron brace making his stride rigid. I followed. "You wanted someone useful." "I wanted a partner. A partner who cannot work is another mouth." He stopped so suddenly that I nearly struck his back. When he turned, there was anger in his face, but not where I expected it. "Who taught you that?" The answer was too large for the narrow path. I stepped around him. "It does not matter. It matters in my barn." I took the second bucket. His hand closed around the handle before I could lift it. He did not touch me, but he did not let go. "My ankle fails," he said. "Some days I can work through it. Some days I cannot. Does that make me only another mouth?" "No." "Why?" "Because this is yours. The work is ours." Snow gathered on his beard. His grip remained steady on the bucket. "You repaired the trace before it killed me," he said. "You found what Quill stole. You made the stores last longer. None of that becomes worthless because your hands need 2 days." I looked away. At Bellamy Farm, praise had always been followed by a larger burden. Rowan's words felt dangerous because he seemed to expect nothing after them. "I do not know how to be here and not earn it," I said. His anger changed shape. "You signed your name. That earned your place under the contract. That is paper." "Yes." He released the bucket. "Paper is useful when people remember it means something." He carried both buckets to the barn. When we returned, he put a basin of warm water on the table, then set my father's awl beside it. "Hands." I hesitated. I am not ordering you to let me tend them, he said. I am ordering you to stop pretending I cannot see. I removed the gloves. The cloth beneath them had dried into the cuts. Rowan's jaw tightened, but he did not scold me. He poured water over the bandages until they loosened, then placed salve and clean strips within reach. He waited. I dressed the wounds myself. The next morning, he left the heavy work untouched and set a bundle of receipts beside my breakfast bowl. I spent the day at the table while he hauled water and wood. Each time he passed through the door, he knocked once against the frame before entering, as if even the shared room deserved warning now. By evening, the pain had eased enough for me to hold a pen. I found the first reference to black pine timber in a letter dated 18 months earlier. Quill had offered to purchase Rowan's Ridge for a sum barely equal to 2 years of fur. Rowan had written one word across the bottom: no. A second letter raised the offer. A third mentioned a proposed rail spur and necessary upland access. The fourth was not an offer at all. It warned that unpaid warehouse balances could be secured against property. You never owed him, I said. Rowan leaned over the table. Not before his fees. He created the balance himself, and now he is marking the ridge. The wind pressed a long hand against the roof. Rowan looked toward the west shutter. The lamp flame bent though the room was sealed. What? I asked. He opened the door. The cold entered first. Beyond the porch, the sky had disappeared behind a wall of moving gray. He watched it for several seconds. That storm was supposed to pass north. How long? If it settles over the ridge, 4 days, maybe more. His gaze moved to the meat shed below the timber line. The roof brace is weak. You said we had enough meat inside. Enough to eat, not enough to lose what is hanging there. We can reinforce it in the morning. No. He reached for his coat. The wind will be on it before midnight. I stood. Rowan looked at my bandaged hands. You stay here. The old fear rose before reason could stop it. I can hold a lantern. You can keep the stove hot and watch the team. That is work, Nora. He fastened his coat, then paused at the door. If I am not back in an hour, ring the barn bell. For what? So I can hear where home is. He stepped into the storm. This time, when the door closed between us, I did not mistake being left inside for being left behind. 43 minutes after Rowan disappeared into the snow, the barn bell moved without anyone touching its rope. The iron tongue struck once. Then again. Wind could shake the frame, but not like that. I pulled on my coat, wrapped my hands, and ran to the barn. Snow erased the porch before I crossed the yard. The bell rope snapped against the post, jerking toward the lower slope. It had not been tied that way when Rowan left. I rang it 3 times. No answer came through the storm. Junebug stamped in her stall. The horses faced the meat shed, ears rigid. I took the repaired hauling harness, fitted it over Junebug, attached the longest rope, and led her into the white. The barn vanished after 12 steps. I rang the bell whenever the wind eased. Between gusts, I listened. Then metal struck wood somewhere downhill. 3 knocks, a pause, 3 more. Rowan? The storm swallowed his answer, but Junebug heard it. She pulled toward the sound. The meat shed appeared beneath the trees. Half its roof had collapsed. A fir lay across it, roots torn from the slope. Rowan was pinned beyond the broken wall. His head and right shoulder were clear. The rest of him disappeared beneath a roof beam and the lower limbs of the tree. One gloved hand held a hatchet he had been striking against the wall. "You were told to ring the bell," I shouted. "I was occupied." His face was gray. I dug until I uncovered his left leg. The iron brace had twisted outward. One side rail snapped above the ankle. His boot pointed at an angle that turned my stomach. "Can you feel your toes?" "Yes." "Move them." He did, barely. The beam crossed his thigh. I pushed beneath it. Nothing. "The shed pulley," he said. The block still hung beneath the surviving roof brace, but its rope had torn free. I looped ours around the beam, climbed across the broken wall, and fed the other end through the pulley. Snow and bark fell into my eyes. My bandaged hands burned each time the rope slid. I tied the free end to Junebug's trace. "When it lifts, pull toward the wall. My leg will not. Use the rest of you." Junebug leaned into the harness. The repaired trace stretched and held. The beam rose an inch. Rowan dragged himself with both arms. Again. The beam climbed high enough for me to wedge a roof plank beneath it. I tied the rope off, crawled back, and caught Rowan under the shoulders. "Now." He pulled. I dragged. His trapped leg came free with a sound I felt through his whole body. He collapsed against me, too heavy to hold upright. For one frightened second, he made no sound. Then he breathed. We could not walk him home. I spread the canvas grain cover on the snow, rolled him onto it, and tied its corners to the hauling line. Rowan opened his eyes as I checked the knot. The meat. The meat can freeze where it hangs. "Roof is open. So is your leg." He did not argue again. I walked beside his head while Junebug pulled, clearing branches and keeping the canvas from turning. Twice he lost consciousness. Each time I rang the handbell until his eyes opened. At the cabin, I built a ramp from the wood sled and 2 planks. Junebug pulled him to the porch. From there, I used the block above the wood passage to slide him across the threshold. Rowan reached for the broken brace. "Leave it," I said. "It is holding the ankle. It is twisting it." His gaze sharpened. "You take it off, the joint may shift." It already has. I cut the straps and eased away the iron. Beneath it, the ankle had swollen against the boot, dark color spreading above the old scars. I packed snow into cloth, wrapped the joint, and braced his leg between folded blankets. Then I fed the stove until the pipe ticked with heat. "Meat shed," he murmured. "I will deal with it." The horses. Fed. Letters. Still in the oilcloth. His eyes closed. "Good," he said, as though I had answered a roll call. The storm lasted 5 days. On the first, I carried what meat I could save into the cabin and hung the rest beneath the barn eaves. On the second, Rowan's ankle burned beneath my hand. Fever took the color from his face and stripped away his restraint. He woke whenever I crossed the room and tried to rise whenever the barn door rattled. "Lie down." "You cannot do all of it. Neither can you." His eyes went to my hands. I had reopened every cut during the rescue. "Then we are poorly staffed," he said. It was almost humor. I held a cup to him until he drank. I worked by sequence because sequence was harder to fear than the whole. Fire, animals, water, food, Rowan, then again. At night I slept in the chair beside the bed. The key remained in my pocket though my room stood empty. On the 3rd day, the swelling stopped climbing. The broken brace lay on the table in 2 pieces. "It cannot be repaired," Rowan said. "Not as it was. The lower rail must carry weight." I have saddle leather, 2-door hinges, and the straight plate from the ruined trace. His expression said no. That plate is too narrow. Not if it is doubled. The hinge pins will shear. Not if the leather takes the side pull. You are describing a harness. I am building one for your ankle. He stared at the ceiling. That is not comforting. I took apart an old saddle skirt, cut 2 layers to fit around his boot and calf, and boiled the leather until it softened. I bent the hinge leaves against the stove plate and riveted them to doubled trace iron. One rivet split and had to be driven out. Rowan corrected me only when I asked. "Higher," he said once. "The pivot must sit above the bone." By the 4th evening, the new brace held its shape. He ran a thumb along the rivets. "This will weigh more than the old one. It will also bend where your ankle needs it to. And if it fails, I make another." He looked at me then. "You should have left me under that roof," he said quietly. The words struck harder than anger. "Do you believe that? You could have taken the team when the storm cleared. The contract would be finished. Quill's debt would die with me. So would you. That was my mistake to pay for." I stood so quickly the chair tipped backward. "You do not get to call yourself a mistake after spending weeks teaching me I am not one." His face changed. I went to the stove because I could not remain beside him without shouting. "I did not pull you out because of the contract," I said. "I did not keep the fire because of wages, and I did not cut apart your saddle because Beatrice sent me here." "Why then?" I turned. "Because when I heard that bell, I was afraid you would die before I reached you." He lowered his eyes. It was the first time I had seen Rowan unable to hide behind silence. On the 5th morning, the storm broke. Blue light filled the cracks around the shutters. The barn roof still stood. Junebug had eaten through half a rail, and the stove had consumed nearly all the wood we had hauled, but the cabin was warm. I fastened the new brace around Rowan's leg. His first attempt to stand failed. The second lifted him long enough to grip the table. "Do not prove anything," I said. "I am testing your work." "Then test it with sense." He took one careful step, then another. The leather creaked, the hinges held. When he reached the chair, he sat heavily and looked across the room. The stacked wood, clean water, ledger covered in oilcloth, and letters waiting by the door. "You kept all of it going," he said. "We kept it going. I was in bed. You told me where the pulley was. That is a thin contribution. It was enough." He rested both hands over the new brace. For once, he did not argue against being counted. Outside, snow slid from the roof. Inside, Rowan reached across the table and turned his palm upward between us. He waited. I placed my bandaged hand in his. His fingers closed carefully, holding nothing harder than I allowed. The storm had made him depend on me. Surviving it taught us that dependence did not have to be a debt. 3 weeks after the storm, Rowan placed a purse of wages beside my ledger and told me I was free to leave when the lower road opened. I stared at the purse. "The contract runs until spring. I am ending it." The new brace showed beneath his trouser leg. It carried his weight, but every step still cost him. He had spent the morning outside for the first time since the accident, and returned pale around the mouth. "Why? You did 6 months' worth of work in 5 days. That is not an answer. It is the one I have." I closed the ledger. "You said either of us could end the contract." "Yes." "So you no longer need me." His head lifted. That is not what I said. It is what you put on the table. The purse sat between us like payment left for a servant dismissed before supper. Rowan gripped the back of the chair. You nearly ruined your hands keeping me alive. I chose to. You slept beside the stove because I could not stand. I chose that too. And if the roof had fallen differently, you would have died trying to pull me out. Do you think giving me money makes that unhappen? His jaw tightened. I think it means you are not trapped here by a bargain made without you. I have not been trapped since you gave me the key. The words stopped him. I stood. You taught me not to hide an injury because a partner must know what she is planning around. Then you decided this alone. I am trying to give you a way out. You already did. I did not take it. He looked toward my room. The key hung from a cord at my waist. I saw you before I ever wrote to Beatrice, he said. I waited. Last summer, outside Quill's warehouse, a freight wagon lost a wheel in the rain. 6 men stood under the awning, arguing about whose fault it was. You crawled into the mud, levered the axle onto a stone, and bound the split hub well enough to reach the smithy. I remembered the wagon. I had not remembered Rowan. Beatrice wrote that Celeste had repaired it, he continued. She listed the same things I had watched you do. I thought I had mistaken which daughter I saw. You knew she was lying before we left the farm. I knew something was wrong. I did not know she had built the whole offer out of your life. Yet you took me. Yes, he did not protect himself with an excuse, and every day since, I have wondered whether giving you choices afterward could make that first choice clean. It cannot. His face went still. But it can make the next one mine. I pushed the purse back across the table. I am not staying because Beatrice sent me. I am not staying because snow closed the road, or because you owe me, or because I owe you. I am staying because this work has my name in the ledger, because the room is mine when I lock it, because you knock. His hand tightened around the purse. And because when you were under that roof, I said, the thought of this cabin without you hurt worse than the thought of never seeing the valley again. Rowan released the chair. He came no closer than the opposite side of the table. Nora, may I touch you? No one had ever made 4 words hold so much room. Yes. He crossed the distance and lifted one hand to my face. His palm was rough and warm. He waited again, giving me time to turn away. I leaned into it. May I kiss you? Yes. The kiss was careful at first, almost solemn. Then my fingers caught in his shirt, and his free hand settled at my waist, not pulling, only holding where I had allowed him. He tasted of coffee and wintergreen salve. When we parted, his forehead rested against mine. The contract? He asked. Continues. A quiet breath of laughter left him. With revisions? 1. I opened the ledger and wrote beneath our earlier terms, neither party may decide what is best for the other without first asking. Rowan read it and signed. Winter loosened slowly after that. Water began ticking from the eaves. The road showed itself in dark strips between shrinking drifts. One morning we followed the creek to inspect the lower traps. Snow had pulled back from the western slope. Beneath it stood a row of fresh survey stakes, driven deep into black pine soil. Red cloth snapped from each one. The nearest stake bore 2 letters burned into the wood. VQ. Rowan looked down the slope toward Larkspur Hollow. The road is open, he said. I closed my hand around the key at my waist. So is his way up. Vernon Quill reached Blackpine Ridge 2 mornings later, bringing my old family and enough armed authority to make his lie look lawful. Deputy Harlan Sykes rode beside him. A hired guard followed with a rifle across his saddle. Beatrice and Celeste came last. Quill stopped below the porch. "Kincaid, you are accused of taking Nora Bellamy against her will. Sign over the Western timber rights, and I may persuade the deputy that no arrest is necessary." Rowan looked at me. "Do you want to leave?" "No." The word carried across the clearing. I set our contract, ledger, invoices, and Quill's letters on the porch rail. I signed under my own name. He paid my wages, and your company invented charges to build a debt against this ridge. Sykes dismounted and read the first page. Beatrice pushed forward. "She is frightened. He has turned her against us. You sent me in Celeste's place. I saved this family. You saved the daughter you preferred." Quill's mouth tightened. "Deputy, take him." The guard climbed the steps and reached for Rowan. Rowan caught his wrist, but the new brace shifted in the mud. His left leg folded. The guard drew his revolver. I lifted the rifle from behind the rail and worked the lever. My shoulder remembered before my fear did. "Drop it." The barrel shook once, then steadied. Sykes moved between us. "Put the gun down," Quill snapped. "I pay you to enforce the law." "You pay county fees," Sykes said. "You do not buy the badge." Celeste made a small sound behind Beatrice. Everyone turned. "Mama lied," she said. Her face had gone white, but she kept speaking. "Mr. Kincaid asked for me because she gave him Nora's skills. When he came, Mama sent Nora instead. Mr. Quill told us to say she had been stolen, or he would take the farm." Beatrice closed her eyes. Sykes gathered the papers. "These come with me." Quill looked from the rifle to the deputy and understood that neither belonged to him now. "This ridge will ruin you," he told Rowan. Rowan stood with one hand on the rail. "Then it will be ours to ruin." They rode down before noon. Beatrice stayed behind. "Celeste and I have nowhere else," she said. I felt pity, but it no longer sounded like obedience. "Celeste can write to Mrs. Vale at the Cedar Wash boarding house. She needs a clerk. I will send a recommendation. And me? You will have to make a life that does not require mine." She flinched. I did not take the words back. Quill's ledgers were seized that summer. The former warehouse clerk answered our letter, and Sykes found the same false charges on 12 other accounts. Quill lost his timber claim before the first rail crew reached the hollow. Rowan and I traveled to the county office when the pass cleared fully. He signed half the cabin, trap line, and water rights into my name. Only after the clerk sealed the deed did he ask, "What do you want us to build here?" A place no stranded person has to fear. And with me, I took his hand. Yes. We married the next week. By the following winter, the cabin had a second guest room, a stronger meat shed, and a blue-painted door with a lock on the inside. Travelers caught above the pass paid when they could and rested without owing anything for safety. Rowan still limped. My hand still ached in deep cold. Love changed neither fact. Beside the front door hung 2 matching keys. One was his, one was mine. Blackpine Ridge had never trapped me. I had chosen the road that climbed to it.